So now we have our mood service running in the back end, giving us fake moods. We can create a pie chart which is going to listen to that service, and it will plot whether moods are largely happy, whether they're sad, or whether they're happy and sad. Yes?
I'm sorry. Can you, maybe because I'm not familiar with Twitter, when you do get the real feed from Twitter, moods and users come from different sources, from different APIs?
No. So we will get onto the back end. So yeah, that's fine. We will definitely get onto that. And I'm hoping that one of the interesting pieces here is figuring out what the mood of a tweet is. Okay. Ultimately, all of this will come from a single feed where we're listening to Twitter, and Twitter gives us a lot of information about each message. It just gives us a big bit of JSON about each message. And we will have to do work around looking at that message, parsing it for various things, turning it into something useful, and then giving that to our UI. But for building the UI, what we're going to do is work with the really simple basic stub services which just give us what we want, just the Twitter handle or just the mood. Okay? So all the complicated stuff around doing stuff with Twitter, we will get to that later on when we start looking at the back-end side of stuff. So we're going to build up this pie chart which kind of says, are the tweets generally happy? Are they generally sad? Are they a bit of both? We're not going to plot the ones which don't fall under any of those categories. This is just kind of really like rough analysis. So obviously the next bit we need to work on, we have our mood stub service. We need to work on the MVC bit, which is going to take our moods and create our actual UI, sort of wire them together. Is that a question?
Yeah, so the user is one service, right, what we did before.
Yeah.
And now you're creating another user, and you're basically rigging the dashboard into these various services.
Right, exactly. So this could be running on some machine in New York, this could be running on some machine in London, and then the UI is going to subscribe to 2 different feeds and parse them and do something useful with them. Sorry?
They're not asynchronous.
They're not asynchronous?
Yeah.
You can connect to WebSockets in an asynchronous fashion. I'm not doing that, but you can. And
I don't mean technically, I mean by nature.
Why not?
Because they come from, in a single package, both bits of information.
You're saying that the 2 streams are not in lockstep, even though they're coming from a single source.
Right.
So they could have been just a single stream where you send both pieces of information from one server, but you're choosing to treat it as 2 servers.
Right. So I could have done this in a completely different way. And I could have said, okay, what I want to feed into here is the full tweet, right? And then I will get the dashboard to figure out of an individual tweet, this is how happy it is, this is the username, this is the message. I could do that. But what I'm looking for here, we're talking about Twitter, which is a whole like fire hose of data. What I want is kind of a high level, kind of rough idea of what's going on Twitter-wise. So in that case, I don't necessarily need to know for this individual tweet what's the important information about it. What I want to know is that in the last half hour, generally, were tweets about my conference very positive? Who was very active on this handle, on this hashtag? You know, what's going on at a sort of high aggregate level? So I don't need to know about individual tweets. What I want to know is, what are the moods? What are the users doing? You know, so I can separate that stuff out. And that allows me eventually to basically split these services out into individual things that could be working on different physical machines, and I could be using those CPUs like really hard to do the analysis and back-end data completely in parallel, without them having to be like, okay, I have one tweet, I need to extract this, and I need to do this, and I need to do that. I can just split it all out.
Basically, we need different filters for the same feed.
Yes. They will, ultimately, over here will be a connection to the Twitter feed. But I'm going to basically parallelize those out. So from the UI point of view, I don't need to know that it comes from a single, it comes from the Twitter API. From a UI point of view, what I care about is where are my moods coming from? Where's my user information coming from? How do I find this data? It doesn't matter that ultimately it will live somewhere else. We're going to go back to our dashboard. And obviously what we're going to do is we're going to need to do the same sort of thing that we did with the user service. So I need to create a client endpoint which is going to connect to my mood service. So let's have a new client endpoint. No, let's not do it there. That's not what I wanted. So I have a new client endpoint. Here, I was using basically a factory method because my client endpoint was really stupid and all I wanted it to do was pass me the username as soon as I got it. With this client endpoint, we're going to do something a little bit more complicated. So I'm not going to use the same factory method. I'm going to create my own client endpoint. This needs to be tweet mood. The client endpoint I've created is going to look at the string values which came from the mood service, the happy, the sad, happy, comma, sad, and turn it into a tweet mood, so a proper object I can do something more useful with. So we need to connect to our mood service. We're going to tell the client endpoint how to turn strings, those comma-separated values of moods, into a tweet mood. So let's do, there we go. We're going to do anonymous inner class again to figure out what's going on with this thing. I need to pass in, to my client endpoint, I need to pass in a message handler, something which figures out how to deal with messages. And these messages, don't forget, are strings, a string which is happy or sad. Make sure we can see this. So I'm going to get a string, which is a message, and I need to return a tweet mood. And that string is a CSV. So I have something called a moods parser, which I've written, which is just going to do figuring out how to split the CSV into happy or sad or whatever. So I'm going to parse this message, and that's going to return me a tweet mood. So this just gives me, we're not really going to look at this in much detail, but this is just basically the logic around how to turn a CSV into a tweet mood. And so I need to say to the message handler, use the mood parser to turn the string that you got off the mood service into a full-blown tweet mood object. And then, of course, I can do my usual shrink this to invisible magic, and I can turn that straight into a method reference. And that method reference means when you get the message from the mood service, use this method to do something to it. And then this will be our mood endpoint. And then, of course, we need to do the same thing we did up here at the top. We're going to mood endpoint. We're going to connect, add a listener to the mood endpoint, because that listener is going to listen to these different moods and do something useful with it, preferably things like updating pie charts, for example. So we need to add up here, we have a mood chart data object. So once again, we have our separation of concerns. We have a data object, which is going to be listening to updates from the service. We're going to have a view, which is going to know how to display it, and a controller, which is going to glue those two things together. So we have our mood chart data listening to to the mood service, which means, once again, I need to make my mood chart data object implement message listener, because that's its job. It's going to listen to messages and do something with it. Okay, well, basically in the same territory we were in with the leaderboard. We're going to get, except the difference is, instead of getting a string message which is a Twitter handle, we're getting a proper object. We're getting a tweet mood object, and I can do stuff with that tweet mood object. Okay, so when I get, so again, this is like event-driven stuff. When I get an event or a message which is a tweet mood, what do I want to do with that? Well, let's have a look at this. Let's rename this. Let's call it mood. What can I do with mood? Well, I could figure out what it is. Is it happy? Is it confused? Confused being happy and sad. Or is it sad? Well, if it's happy, then I think that I'm going to want to increment the happy portion. So these portions, the happy portion, the sad portion, and the confused portion, are JavaFX classes that are part of the pie chart. So I have a pie chart data, and what I'm going to want to do is I initialize those to 0. So I need to set that portion I basically need to increment it every time I see a new happy tweet, or increment it if I see a sad tweet. Okay? So if I see a happy mood, then I need to set the value to be happy portion, get value, +1, increment it. Okay? Is everyone following with this so far? Can anyone see any problem with this line? Set pi value, get pi value +1.
To do something with platform dot.
No.
I was thinking about racing conditions.
Yes, exactly. So the point here was race conditions. So whenever you see anything which is a set and a get in the same line, you have to worry about, well, okay, I'm going to get this pi value, and it's going to be 5. I'm going to add 1 to it, which makes it 6. And I'm going to set the value over here to be 6. If I get this value and it's 5, and someone else changes it to 7 underneath the covers, I add 1, make this 6, and set this to 6. I've just totally messed up what's really happening. It's not an atomic increment. What we did last time with leaderboard is we made them atomic increments, because it's, especially if you're working in a multi-threaded environment, it's just much better to do things that way. In our particular case, in this case, this is safe to do because we're only updating this value from this one thread. Okay, so it's safe in this case, but only because we know it's safe. Generally speaking, when you see a get and a set in the same line, you should be thinking, is there a possibility of a race condition? Is there another thread which could be updating this value under the covers? Okay, so that's worth thinking about. There's, if you look at the master code, I think it looks a little bit different because I changed it so it has an atomic increment under the covers, because it's just better practice to do stuff that way. But this will work, and this will work fine for our particular case. Are atomic values like atomic integer, atomic long, is it better than using synchronized? Yes, anytime you're using the synchronized keyword, you've basically put a massive big weight in your application. A synchronized keyword means that you're probably not doing it right. There are, particularly with later versions of Java, there are much nicer, much faster tools you can use to build stuff.
Okay, re-entered log, whatever. Is locking worse than using already prepared atomic
yes.
things?
Locking is worse than using atomic variables, yes. Atomic variables can use CPU instructions, so they can do it very, very quickly. Locking has to go to the operating system, so the operating system has to halt everything and figure out whether you can really access this thing or not. Atomic variables are better than locking. So if you're doing something simple, like doing an increment or a decrement, think about using atomic variables.